can look my video? Okay, let's go.
In the shadow of 14176, the marble floors of the Capitol still held echoes of footsteps long gone. Those who walked powerfully, those who whispered through closed doors, and those who were erased from history before their echoes faded. Freshly sworn in, Senator Alex Rayner walked them with both awe and caution. At 32, Alex was the youngest senator in over 3 decades. A charismatic independent from Colorado with a disarming smile and a ruthless talent for research, Alex had built a campaign on transparency, digital rights, and dismantling opaque government structures. Voters, weary of corporate influence and intelligence overreach, welcomed his fiery, tech-savvy rhetoric. But politics in Washington didn't run on idealism. It ran on what wasn't said. That's why Executive Order 14176 was different. It was buried deep in a declassified archive, released during a routine purge of old intelligence documents. At first glance, 14176 looked like another Cold War artifact, dated December 19, 1991, the day before the official dissolution of the Soviet Union. It bore the title, Executive Order 14176, Contingency Planning for Strategic Domestic Preservation. Dry, bureaucratic, easy to overlook. But it wasn't. The language was dense but alarming. It authorized a covert coordination network of intelligence, corporate, and military entities to preserve national continuity in the event of geopolitical destabilization, including internal ideological subversion through digital infrastructure. Translation: the government had built a hidden framework to monitor, shape, and suppress domestic dissent if it believed the nation's digital landscape threatened stability. And the framework wasn't theoretical. Attached were directives to companies like Etherlink, early developers of domestic internet infrastructure. Names of defense contractors appeared, along with private foundations and think tanks that still operated today, rebranded, repackaged, but very much alive. Alex found it while researching a bill on internet privacy protections. A minor mention in a footnote of a footnote. It led him to more and more, until he was staring at a wall of connections. That night, in the low hum of his Georgetown apartment, he knew he had found something too big to bury. Alex took it to the Senate Oversight Committee, expecting resistance. He got silence. The chair, Senator Delaney, smiled thinly. "You're passionate, Alex. But this is Cold War detritus. Ancient history. Let the dust lie." "They're still operating," Alex said. "Not officially. But the mechanisms, the funding flows, they exist. We're talking about private surveillance inside U.S. borders. Possibly election interference. Possibly," Delaney said. "Or possibly not. Let sleeping ghosts sleep." That was when he knew. It wasn't just inertia. It was fear. In a press conference streamed live and uncensored, Alex revealed 14176 to the public. He released full documentation, including annotated links showing how today's defense contractors traced lineage back to the entities listed in the order. He spoke calmly, deliberately, warning of an unseen architecture still influencing democracy. The internet ignited. Hashtags exploded. Talk shows ran segments. Whistleblowers emerged. A former NSA data analyst claimed that in 2012, they'd run a test protocol eerily similar to what was described in 14,170 SIXS directives. Then came the pushback. 3 days later, Alex's Senate email was breached. His staff's personal devices were wiped remotely. A smear campaign began. Rumors of drug use in college, fabricated allegations of harassment, doctored footage of a fictional extramarital affair. He stood his ground. But behind the scenes, something else had started. She called herself Sparrow. Encrypted email. Anonymous server in Finland. Subject line: 14176 is just the first layer. Look deeper. Watch the shadows. Attached was a single image. A scan of a memo dated 2004. Top secret clearance. Bearing the same internal code name from the original order, Cicada Overwatch. Unlike the original 14,176 documents, this one was post 9/11, with language that blended anti-terror strategy with behavioral algorithm profiling. It mentioned Project Dustnet and a company Alex had never heard of, Halberd Dynamics. He replied cautiously, "Who are you? How do you know this?" No answer came for 2 days. Then, "I used to be part of it." Until I wasn't. Halberd Dynamics, as it turned out, was a small contractor with no public footprint, no website, and no lobby records. Yet it received $137 million in government contracts in 2023 alone, all funneled through shell organizations, all for cyber defense enhancement architecture. Alex brought it up in session. The room went cold. Afterwards, he received a visit, not from another senator, but a man with no name tag, no official credentials, who waited in his office and said simply, "Senator Rayner, the future is built by those who understand the present's constraints. You're young, you're loud, but you don't know how deep this goes." Alex stood his ground. "Is that a threat?" "It's an observation. Consider redirecting your energy. There are safer causes." The man left without another word. That night, Sparrow messaged again. "He's part of it. You just met one of the Whisper Group." Alex had never heard of them. "What is the Whisper Group?" Pause. Then, Unofficial Continuity Network. Started after September 11th. Privately sustained. Same mission as 14176. But fully off-book. They don't control the government. They shape what the government sees. He stared at the screen for a long time. The lines between conspiracy and reality had been erased. 3 weeks later, someone broke into his apartment. Nothing was stolen. But his analog notebook, the one he used for notes he didn't trust to a computer, was gone. He went on live TV the next morning. No notes. No teleprompter. Just raw conviction. The government created an invisible backbone to guide democracy. Now it's evolved. Now it feeds itself. And if we don't shine a light on it, it will consume the very soul of this republic. That night, his poll numbers tripled. And so did the threats. The night after Alex's televised speech, Washington, D.C. had a familiar, oppressive stillness. The kind that came with snow, but there were no flakes falling, no winds rustling through the monuments. Just the echo of his own voice in the empty halls of the Capitol. Alex barely slept. The threats had started, real ones this time. Not just cyber attacks, but more insidious. Anonymous phone calls, ghostly figures in the reflection of storefront windows, unmarked black SUVs trailing him for miles. In the glow of his apartment's kitchen light, Alex pored over every document he could find on the Whisper Group. He didn't trust Sparrow, but she'd been right about Halberd Dynamics. He found connections that linked the company to the Department of Homeland Security and, strangely, a quiet contract with the Smithsonian Institution. His phone buzzed with an encrypted message from Sparrow. "You're not looking hard enough. The real threat is a house of mirrors. The Whisper Group's hands are in more than just surveillance. They've built a new arm, psychological operations. You're too public. They'll use you to make an example." His fingers hovered over the screen, wondering how deep he was willing to dive into this. The truth, whatever it was never as clear as it seemed. The next morning, Alex arrived at the Senate to find that his office had been rearranged. His staff's personal files were gone. Every document on 14,176, every lead, every note, vanished. But the data on his external drives was untouched. Whoever was behind this knew he wouldn't back down. That afternoon, he convened a meeting with his closest allies, Senator Brianna Ford, a pragmatic Democrat from Oregon, and Representative James Choi, a tech industry insider turned lawmaker. Both had been initially skeptical, but Alex's persistence was wearing them down. "It's not just about the information," Brianna said, flipping through the latest reports. "It's the fact that we don't know where the lines blur between corporate interests and national security anymore. They're not two different worlds. They're intertwined." Choi nodded. "And we don't have the leverage to stop it. These entities have more money, more resources, and, frankly, more secrets than we can shake a stick at. Who's behind it? Who are we even fighting?" Alex looked out of the window, his thoughts racing. What if we could disrupt them, even temporarily? Make it public? Expose the connections, force a disclosure? Brianna's gaze darkened. "You saw what happened last night, Alex. That's not just political opposition. That's something more dangerous. Which is why we need to hit them where it hurts," he replied. "We go after their infrastructure." It was a dangerous plan, but Alex knew that he had reached a tipping point. If he didn't strike now, he would be swallowed whole. For the next several days, Alex worked tirelessly with his allies, pulling together every bit of evidence he could find. They mapped out the connections: Halberd Dynamics, Project DUSKNET, the Whisper Group, and, most disturbingly, the private networks that had emerged in the aftermath of 9/11. Names on paper were one thing, but the covert operations ran deeper. All roads seemed to lead back to an entity known only as the Coalition. By the end of the week, they had compiled a public dossier, one that linked Halberd to multiple high-profile politicians, military contractors, and intelligence officers. The dossier, if released, would explode in the public consciousness, shattering any semblance of governmental oversight over these shadow operations. Brianna leaned over the table, eyes scanning the documents. "This is big, Alex. This is dangerous." "I'm ready," he said. His voice didn't shake, but his hands did. He could feel the weight of what he was about to do, but he had no choice. The threat of the Whisper Group was too real. The release of the dossier was a calculated move, but even Alex couldn't predict the immediate fallout. The news broke with a fury that rocked every media outlet across the nation. Every cable channel, every social media platform picked up on the story. But that's when the interference began. Minutes after the press release hit, the official statements came rolling in, denials, dismissals, and distractions. Senators and former officials publicly mocked Alex, calling the dossier a conspiracy theory and a partisan attack on national security. The same politicians who had been silent during the release of 14,176 now rushed to suppress the story. Then came the coordinated disinformation campaign. Fake accounts, false narratives, and paid trolls on every platform, all aimed at discrediting the investigation. It was clear that someone with vast resources, was working overtime to bury the truth. Alex's team tried to fight back. They pushed their findings to independent journalists, forced hearings, and demanded inquiries. But the machinery was vast, and it moved swiftly. The Whisper Group wasn't just an idea. It was a deep, pervasive network that could crush any dissenting voice. In private meetings, Alex spoke to Brianna and Choi. "They're trying to drown us out. They want to turn us into the story. They're controlling the narrative. We're already in it," Brianna replied grimly. "The only thing we can do now is expose them further." But it wasn't just the public pressure that was growing. There were darker forces at work, forces that didn't want their secrets exposed. That evening, after a tense Senate hearing on the dossier, Alex found an unexpected visitor waiting in his office. A woman, mid-30s, dressed in business attire, but with an air of danger around her. She stood by the window, her silhouette framed by the Washington skyline. "Senator Rayner," she said, her voice smooth but cold. "I'm not here to make threats. I'm here to offer a proposition." Alex's pulse quickened. "Who are you?" "You'll want to know my name soon enough. For now, you can call me Hawk. I'm a consultant. My clients are deeply interested in your pursuit of truth." Alex's hand instinctively went to the drawer where he kept his gun, but the woman didn't move. "I think you already know how this ends, Alex. The same way every whistleblower ends. Broken, bankrupt, or disappeared. This is your last chance to back out. You'll still have your career, a bright future ahead of you." Alex met her gaze. "If I stop now, the truth never sees the light of day. I can't do that." Hawk's smile was thin, almost amused. "Then you'll see the real cost of your truth. It's not the public that will come for you, Senator. It's the shadows." Before Alex could reply, she was gone, just as quietly as she'd appeared. The next day, his closest staff began to vanish. One by one, each person he trusted most was either silenced, discredited, or outright disappeared. He called Brianna. Her voice was tense on the other end. "Alex, it's happening. The Whisper Group is moving against us." "I know," he replied. "But we can't stop now. We've come too far." The shadows were closing in around Alex. Each passing hour felt like a countdown, a clock ticking towards something he couldn't control. The Whisper Group's grip on the political and digital landscape was suffocating. But what terrified him most wasn't the disinformation campaigns or the smear tactics. It was the quiet realization that, no matter how hard he fought, he was a single voice against an army of unseen operators. His staff was in disarray. People he had trusted were suddenly distant, their faces blank and anxious as they answered his calls with hesitations, their voices quivering with the tension of fear. Every time someone walked into his office, Alex found himself wondering if they were friend or foe. The pressure was mounting, and the walls felt like they were closing in. By the end of the week, Alex had barely left his office. His allies were retreating into the shadows, and he could sense the mounting desperation in the corridors of the capital. Brianna and Choi had both warned him there was no way out of this. No graceful way to step back from the precipice. Either Alex would continue pushing and risk losing everything, or he could fall silent, let the Whisper Group win, and preserve his political future. But silence wasn't an option. One morning, just after dawn, Alex received another message from Sparrow. He'd stopped questioning who she was. He just needed her information. She was the only one still feeding him truth in a world that had descended into obfuscation. They know everything, Alex. You're their priority. The coalition has activated. They've moved all their assets into position. The next phase begins today. They're going after the weakest link in your chain, your family. Alex's heart stopped. He grabbed his phone, his mind racing. No, he whispered. They wouldn't. They can't. But Sparrow's message wasn't a threat. It was a warning. If you want to protect them, you need to disappear. They'll be watching every move you make now. The realization hit him like a thunderclap. He had thought they were simply after his career, after his integrity. But now he knew. They were after everything. The coalition wanted to erase him and everything he stood for. The next few hours were a blur of frantic phone calls, encrypted messages, and decisions that seemed to spiral out of his control. He met with Brianna in a quiet corner of the capital, her face drawn and pale. We need to act now, Alex. We're running out of time. If we don't expose them before they shut us down, we'll disappear just like all the others. And they'll bury this truth for good. Choi had been working in parallel, digging deeper into the connections that tied the Whisper Group to the highest echelons of power. The deeper he went, the darker the rabbit hole became. Halberd Dynamics, the Coalition, and the Whisper Group. These weren't just shadowy organizations pulling strings behind the scenes. They were the puppet masters of a global order. Alex, look at this, Choi said, pulling up a series of encrypted documents on his tablet. This is how they operate, full-spectrum control. They've infiltrated every sector of society, every network of influence. This is bigger than we thought. Brianna's eyes narrowed. We can't go public with this yet. If we do, it'll be our last move. Alex clenched his fists. I know, but what's the alternative? The answer hung in the air, unspoken. There was no alternative. In the midst of the chaos, a phone call came that sent chills through Alex's spine. The voice on the other end was familiar, but it had changed. It was colder, more controlled. Senator Rayner, I think it's time you and I had a conversation. Alex's stomach dropped. Who is this? Does the name Hawk mean anything to you? Alex gripped the phone tightly. What do you want? I'm offering you a way out, Hawk's voice said, smooth as ice. A deal. Step down from this investigation, stop looking into 14176 and the Whisper Group, and you can walk away. No consequences. No more threats. Alex fought to keep his voice steady. And if I don't, you'll be gone within a week. Discredited, destroyed. It'll be a tragedy, of course. A young senator cut down before his time. But those things happen. Alex felt a chill creep up his spine. I don't make deals with threats. Then don't say I didn't warn you. The line went dead. Alex spent the rest of the day in his office, pacing, his mind turning over and over the choices ahead. He had come too far to turn back now, but the cost was clear. Every ally he had, every piece of his life that had once been safe, was now exposed. The coalition had the power to take everything from him, and they would, if he didn't act fast. His phone buzzed again. Sparrow's name flashed across the screen. They're moving faster than I thought. You've been flagged as a high-priority target. If you're going to fight this, you need to be ready to go underground. This isn't just about protecting your career anymore. It's about survival. Trust no one, not even your closest allies. Alex felt his pulse quicken. He knew Sparrow was right. If he wasn't careful, he could end up like so many others, lost, erased from history, a casualty in a war nobody knew was being fought. By nightfall, Alex made his decision. The fight had changed. It was no longer just about the truth. It was about survival. He called Brianna and Choi to a secure location, a safe house just outside of Washington, and laid out his plan. We need to go dark, he said, his voice steady but heavy with the weight of the decision. I'll keep pushing the investigation, but I can't trust anyone anymore. Not in this city. We'll need to go offline, use encrypted channels. And from here on out, we operate under total secrecy. Brianna hesitated. But if we go dark, we lose the support we've built. We'll have no access to the public or the media. I know, Alex said. But if we don't, they'll tear us apart. We have to be smarter, more strategic. It's not just about fighting the system. It's about surviving long enough to expose it. Choi nodded. Then let's do it. Let's disappear and let the world think we're out of the fight. And while they're looking the other way, we hit them where it hurts. The next morning, Alex disappeared from the public eye. His social media accounts went silent. His office was cleared. To the outside world, he was a fallen politician, discredited, silenced. But in the shadows, Alex Rayner continued the fight. His team, now scattered and hidden, worked in the dark, infiltrating the systems that the Whisper Group had built. Every move they made was carefully calculated, each document released with precision. They had to move like ghosts in a world that was rapidly descending into surveillance. The decision to vanish had been a gamble, but Alex knew it was the only way to keep the truth alive. If the Whisper Group had anything to say about it, he would never be allowed to expose their machinations. But disappearing from the public, I didn't mean they would stop watching him. It only meant that, for now, they were forced to look elsewhere. For a brief moment, it seemed as if they had succeeded in fading from the public consciousness. His name disappeared from headlines, his image from social media. The disinformation campaigns gradually wound down, and the media shifted focus to the next scandal, the next election cycle. But in the dark, Alex worked. He had assembled a small, trusted team of digital operatives who shared his conviction: Brianna, Choi, and a few other allies, former hackers, whistleblowers, and security experts who had been on the fringes of the system. Now, they were the tip of the spear, working from encrypted servers and using a labyrinth of VPNs and proxies to stay off the grid. Every communication was steganographed, every operation shrouded in layers of misdirection. Their first move was to take down Halberd Dynamics' online presence. The company, a quiet ghost in the business world, had managed to avoid significant scrutiny by maintaining a low profile and funneling its operations through shadowy networks. But its infrastructure was vulnerable, and Alex's team knew it. They carefully planted a series of backdoors into Halberd's systems, allowing them access to sensitive data and communications. What they found was shocking: detailed plans for the next phase of DustNet and the integration of artificial intelligence-driven predictive models that could forecast dissent before it happened. "These people are trying to build a mind-reading surveillance system," Brianna said, her face lit by the glow of her laptop screen. "They're not just watching, they're anticipating every move." Choi's fingers flew over his keyboard. "And it's all part of a larger system. A global network that has infiltrated governments, businesses, and NGOs. This isn't just about controlling information. It's about controlling thought itself." Alex leaned back in his chair, letting the weight of it all settle on him. This wasn't just a conspiracy. It was an ongoing operation with far-reaching consequences. The Whisper Group, the Coalition, Halberd Dynamics, all of them were linked by a shared mission: to control the flow of information, manipulate society, and shape the future to their own design. They weren't just watching history unfold, they were engineering it. With each piece of data they uncovered, the team grew more determined. But their actions did not go unnoticed. It wasn't long before the digital noise began to change, patterns of interference that hinted at someone tracking their movements. The Coalition had its eyes on them, but it was more than just surveillance. They were actively hunting them. Alex stood at the window of the safe house, his gaze fixed on the distant skyline of Washington. It was a city that had become both a sanctuary and a battlefield. "They know we're digging. They'll come for us soon." Brianna, who had been scanning her own set of documents, looked up. "We need to be careful. There are too many variables. Too many people inside the system who can leak information." "I know," Alex said quietly. "We've crossed the line. There's no turning back now." The urgency in his voice wasn't lost on her. "Then we need to move faster. We have to get this information out before they shut us down." Alex and his team decided it was time to strike at the heart of the Whisper Group, the Coalition. They knew that exposing their infrastructure wasn't enough. They needed to disrupt it at its core. If the Coalition could be severed from its resources, its influence would crumble. But it wasn't going to be easy. The Coalition's operations were decentralized, hidden within layers of shell companies and proxy entities that protected the real power behind the curtain. But they had something the Coalition didn't: a hacker who had once been inside. Her name was Mara Sullivan. Once a high-ranking analyst at the National Security Agency, Mara had vanished from public life after a high-profile scandal. The story went that she'd been involved in a breach of classified material, but the details were murky at best. In reality, Mara had been one of the first to see the shadows lurking behind the government's so-called counterterrorism programs. When she blew the whistle, they had silenced her, wiping her existence from the records. But now, she was back, and she had her own vendetta. Mara had a long history with Halberd Dynamics, and she knew the backdoors they used. She had once worked on Project DUSKNET, and it had haunted her ever since. She had seen the future they were building, a future where citizens were predictably manageable, their every action traced and analyzed by algorithms designed to anticipate and suppress any deviation from the norm. They think they can predict rebellion, Mara said as she entered the safe house, her eyes scanning the room. But they're wrong. What they don't understand is that the future they're building isn't predictable. It's fragile. It relies on assumptions about human behavior that don't always hold true. Alex leaned forward. You're saying we can break it? Mara smiled, a cold glint in her eyes. If we can break their predictive models, we can create chaos in their system. The coalition thinks they're controlling the narrative, but if we disrupt the data, they'll lose control. Choi looked up from his tablet. It's risky. If we mess with their data, they'll know exactly where to look. Mara's smile faded. And they'll come after us. But we're already in too deep. We either break the system, or we get broken. They spent the next several days preparing for the operation. Alex, Brianna, and Choi worked on securing their communications while Mara infiltrated Halberd's systems, moving through layers of firewalls and encryption. The key was to access DUSNet's predictive algorithms. If they could disrupt them, it would throw the entire system into disarray. It was a dangerous game. Every second they spent in the system, they risked detection. But they had no choice. The coalition had to be exposed, and DUSNet was the linchpin that held it all together. The night they launched the operation, Alex could feel the weight of the world pressing on him. He knew that if they succeeded, they would destabilize the coalition, but if they failed, they would be hunted down and erased from history. Mara's fingers danced across the keyboard, her eyes locked on the screen. We're in. I've located the main algorithm. Choi held his breath. Are you sure we can disrupt it without causing a catastrophic cascade? Mara didn't answer immediately. She was too focused. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, she spoke. It's done. We've triggered the disruption. For a moment, everything was silent. Then, without warning, the room erupted in noise, alerts, flashing screens, and the unmistakable sound of their own security systems being breached. They know, Alex said, his voice tight. We've been compromised. Mara's face was a mask of concentration. I've isolated the breach. We've bought ourselves some time, but it wouldn't last long. The coalition was coming for them. And this time, they weren't going to let anyone stand in their way. The crackle of alarms in the safe house was deafening. Alex's heart pounded as the digital intrusion warning blinked on the monitors, red lights flashing on every device in the room. They had been compromised. The coalition had activated their countermeasures, and they were coming. Shut everything down, Mara barked, her fingers flying over the keyboard. We need to wipe everything. Now, Choi scrambled to disconnect their external drives, while Brianna quickly sealed the physical access points to the house, reinforcing the doors with makeshift barricades. The seconds felt like hours. Outside, the world continued as usual, unaware that inside the walls of this forgotten house, a battle was taking place, one that would determine not just Alex's fate, but the future of the nation. We've been compromised, Mara repeated, her voice tense. They've traced our digital footprints back to us. It's over if we stay here. We have to keep going, Alex said, his mind already working through their next move. We can't afford to stop now. We're close. Close to what, though? He had no illusions. The coalition was vast, and they had their sights set on him and his team. The Whisper Group had always been one step ahead, manipulating the data and the systems, pulling strings from the shadows. The disruption they'd caused in DUSNet was just the beginning. The ripple had yet to fully spread, but it was enough. The cracks were starting to show. Alex could feel it. We're not getting out the way we came in, Brianna said, her eyes narrowing. We need a new exit. Mara stopped typing for a moment, locking eyes with Alex. We have one chance. There's an old underground network. Used to be for military personnel, now it's just a myth. But I know the access codes. Then we move now, Alex said, already moving toward the back door. His pulse was steady, but his mind was racing. Everyone, stay sharp. No mistakes. The underground network Mara had mentioned was real, but only in fragments. They had no idea how far it ran or where it led, but it was their best shot at escaping the Coalition's net. As they made their way through the safe house's narrow corridors, Alex couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. Each door they passed, each shadow that flickered in their peripheral vision, seemed to hold a danger too vast to comprehend. Every sound felt amplified, like the walls themselves were closing in on them. Mara led the way, pulling up a floorboard to reveal a hidden hatch. The passage was dark, lit only by the faint glow of their flashlights. They descended into the tunnel, the cool air biting at their skin. Once inside, the sounds of the outside world, the buzzing of electronics, the pounding of feet on the pavement, disappeared. They were deep underground now, moving through an old network of tunnels that had once been used for clandestine operations during the Cold War. The walls were lined with ancient electrical cables and thick concrete, a stark contrast to the sleek, polished world of today's digital warfare. I can't believe this place still exists, Brianna murmured, her voice echoing in the stillness. Everything has a purpose, Mara replied cryptically. Even this. Alex had no time to dwell on the meaning of Mara's words. His mind was elsewhere, focused on what came next. They had disrupted DustNet, but they had only scratched the surface. The Coalition was still intact. The data they had uncovered from Halberd Dynamics pointed to something even more dangerous than they had imagined. A global network of surveillance that extended beyond government and corporate control, an entity with no national allegiance, operating above the law. As they pressed on through the tunnels, Alex couldn't help but think back to the beginning. The discovery of Executive Order 14176 and the revelations that had led him down this dangerous path. Had it all been worth it? The people they had lost, the friends who had disappeared, the shadows that had grown deeper with every passing day. Was it all for nothing? Focus, Alex, Brianna said, pulling him from his thoughts. We're almost there. Hours later, they reached the exit, a nondescript door set into the side of an abandoned warehouse, long forgotten by time. Mara quickly input the security codes, and the door creaked open. They emerged into the night, the sound of their boots echoing on the cold concrete. For a moment, Alex felt a rush of relief, as if they had won some small victory against the invisible force that had hunted them for so long. But that relief was short-lived. The moment they stepped outside, Alex saw them. The black SUVs were parked in the shadows, their engines running. A group of men in dark suits stood nearby, their eyes scanning the area. It was clear, the Coalition knew where they were. They had anticipated their every move. A man in a suit stepped forward, his face obscured by the darkness. Senator Rayner, he said, his voice calm and detached. You've made a grave mistake. You should have stayed out of this. Alex's heart skipped a beat. This wasn't just another threat. It was the Coalition itself, moving in for the kill. You won't get away with this, Alex said, his voice steady, though his pulse raced. We already have, the man replied, a smirk playing at the corners of his lips. You're out of options. You've disrupted our systems, caused chaos. But you can't stop us. Not anymore. Alex's mind raced, the pieces falling into place. They weren't just going to arrest him. The Coalition didn't operate that way. They silenced people. Permanently. A shot rang out. Alex's instincts kicked in. He dove to the ground, narrowly avoiding the bullet that whizzed past him. The others scrambled for cover, but it was too late. They were surrounded. Move, Mara shouted, pulling Alex to his feet. We've got one chance. They ran, sprinting toward the back alleyway, dodging gunfire as the Coalition agents closed in. The night air was thick with tension, the sound of footsteps and heavy breathing echoing through the narrow streets. Alex's heart was hammering in his chest as they turned corners, desperate to escape. But the Coalition was relentless. They knew the city better than anyone, and soon, they would have them cornered. Down, Brianna shouted, as they reached an old sewer grate. They dropped into the underground system just as the first black SUV skidded to a halt at the end of the alley. Gunfire erupted above them, but the team was already several feet below ground, their only hope of escape now the labyrinth of tunnels stretching before them. Alex, breathless, glanced at Mara. "How much further?" "Not far," Mara replied, her voice strained. "But we need to move quickly. The longer we stay here, the more they'll close in on us." They moved deeper into the maze of underground tunnels, their footsteps echoing off the damp walls. But even as they ran, Alex couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't just a chase. It was a final stand. The coalition had won in every way that mattered, and now they were simply cleaning up the mess left behind. Back at the surface, the city's lights were fading, the sounds of life distant but still there. Above ground, the coalition was already mobilizing their full force, tracking, tracing, anticipating. They were everywhere. No matter how far Alex ran, no matter how many layers of security he breached, he knew they were always one step ahead. It was clear now, they weren't just protecting their system, they were eradicating any trace of resistance. And the final question burned in Alex's mind as they disappeared into the dark of the underground. How far would he be willing to go to expose the truth, if it meant sacrificing everything and everyone he loved? The underground tunnels stretched before them, twisting and turning like an endless labyrinth. The faint smell of damp concrete filled the air as Alex and his team ran, their footsteps echoing off the walls. Each breath they took felt like it might be their last. They could hear the faint thrum of the city above them, the hum of life continuing without them, unaware of the game that was being played beneath the surface. They didn't speak much as they moved, the weight of their situation hanging heavy over them. The coalition had nearly caught up to them. Their lives were no longer their own, and the truth they sought to expose seemed more distant with every passing second. Mara led the way, her knowledge of the underground network proving invaluable. She had been here before, but even she had to admit that they were in uncharted territory. The map she'd once memorized had long since become obsolete, and now they were navigating on instinct. "They'll follow us down here," Brianna said, her voice tight with concern. "We can't outrun them forever." "We don't need to outrun them," Alex said, glancing over his shoulder. "We just need to buy enough time." "I hope you're right," Brianna muttered, "because we're running out of it." After what felt like hours of twisting corridors and dark passages, they finally came to a heavy steel door. Mara paused, her hand resting on the handle. "This is it," she said. "The next section of the network. It's not much, but it's our only way out." Alex nodded, though the uncertainty gnawed at him. "How far does this go?" Mara didn't respond immediately. Instead, she pushed the door open, revealing a narrow staircase leading even deeper into the earth. It was cramped and poorly lit, but it seemed to promise safety, at least for the moment. The group descended in silence, each step taking them farther from the surface and deeper into the unknown. Hours passed, but time felt irrelevant. The deeper they went, the more disoriented they became. The tunnels were a maze of old infrastructure, abandoned systems, and forgotten connections, places that no one had used in decades. Yet even here, beneath the layers of history, they couldn't escape the sense that the coalition was always one step ahead. Every creak of the old walls, every flicker of the dim lights overhead, made them jump. "Do you think they'll find us down here?" Brianna asked quietly, her voice tense with fear. "I don't know," Alex replied, his voice a little too steady. "But if they do, we'll be ready. We have to be." They had no choice but to keep moving. They could sense the walls closing in on them, and with every step, it felt as though the coalition's net was tightening. The knowledge that the Whisper Group's global reach extended so far, that they could orchestrate events on a scale Alex had never imagined, was both overwhelming and terrifying. It wasn't just about exposing the truth anymore. It was about survival. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, they reached another door. This one was different. It wasn't like the others. There was something more deliberate about it, more intentional. Mara approached it carefully, as though she were remembering something from long ago. She entered a code into the keypad and turned the handle. "Are we sure this is a good idea?" Brianna asked, eyeing the door nervously. "We don't have a choice," Mara said, her voice flat. "This is the only way out." The door creaked open, revealing a narrow tunnel that led to a dimly lit chamber. It was small, with concrete walls that were scarred by time. But there was something else in the room, something Alex hadn't anticipated. A single chair sat in the center of the room, and the walls were lined with old monitors, each one displaying streams of data. Alex felt his blood run cold as he realized what they had stumbled upon. This is one of their old command centers, Mara said, her voice a mixture of awe and fear. Before they moved everything online, they operated from places like this. Which means what? Brianna asked, her gaze sweeping the room. It means that there's information here, information that can't be accessed anywhere else. It's old, but it's still critical. We can use this. Alex stepped forward, his mind racing. What exactly are we looking for? Mara gestured to the monitors. Look at the data streams. They're not just collecting information, they're controlling it. Predicting movements, analyzing behavior patterns, tracking key individuals. If we can tap into this, we can get the real data, the unfiltered truth. But will it be enough? Brianna asked. Can we get out before they catch up to us? Alex didn't answer immediately. The weight of the situation was too heavy. He could feel it in the pit of his stomach, the gnawing sense that every second spent in this room was 1 second closer to being caught. But it was a risk they had to take. We don't have a choice, Alex said, more to himself than anyone else. We need this information. If we don't get it now, we might never have the chance again. As Mara sat at one of the old terminals, her fingers flying over the keys, the rest of the team kept watch. The sound of the data streams filled the room, a steady hum that felt almost like the pulse of the very system they were fighting against. For what seemed like an eternity, they sat in silence, waiting. Alex's mind was spinning, the gravity of the situation weighing on him with every passing moment. The coalition wasn't just a network of people, it was an omnipresent force. It wasn't just trying to suppress dissent, it was trying to control everything. And the more Alex uncovered, the more it became clear that the coalition's grip had only grown stronger since Executive Order 14176 had been enacted. What's taking so long? Brianna asked, breaking the silence. I'm in, Mara said, her voice steady despite the tension. I found the core data. Alex moved to her side, watching the screen as she began to sift through the information. What she found sent a chill down his spine. This isn't just about surveillance, Mara said quietly, her eyes scanning the data. This is a blueprint for a new world order. They're not just tracking individuals, they're predicting entire societies. And they're manipulating the data to guide those societies in the direction they want. Alex's mind reeled. This wasn't just a few rogue agents. This was a global agenda, one that was years in the making. We can expose this, Mara said, her voice resolute. This is everything. This is how they've controlled the narrative, how they've controlled every aspect of our lives. But we need to move fast, Brianna interjected. They won't give us another chance. They know we're here. The urgency in her voice was unmistakable. They had no more time to waste. Before Alex could respond, the sound of footsteps echoed in the distance. Distant at first, but growing louder with each passing second. The coalition was closing in on them again. They had to act fast. Mara's fingers flew over the keyboard, extracting the core files they needed, compressing them into a portable drive. But just as she was about to hit send, the door at the far end of the room flew open, and armed coalition agents poured in. The sound of boots echoing against the concrete was deafening. The coalition had found them, again. The door had barely opened before the agents spilled into the room, their guns raised, their expressions cold and predatory. Alex's heart skipped a beat. The fragile sense of control they had fought so hard to maintain shattered in an instant. This wasn't just about running anymore. This was a confrontation, a battle. The moment they'd feared for so long had finally arrived. Move, Mara shouted, shoving Alex toward the back of the room. Get to the escape route. Brianna and Choi were already rushing to the far side of the room, where a second exit, hidden behind a row of old, dust-covered filing cabinets, offered their only chance for escape. But the agents were fast, faster than they had anticipated. One of them, a tall man with a scar running down his face, stepped forward, blocking their path. You're not going anywhere, he said, his voice calm, but with an underlying menace. His hand rested on the grip of his weapon. Step aside, Alex growled, his voice cold and unwavering. He had no time for fear or hesitation. His hands balled into fists. You can't win this. You're right about one thing, the man said. This fight was never about winning. It's about ending it. The man's words hung in the air like a death sentence, And Alex knew in that moment that the coalition wasn't going to just arrest them. They had crossed a line that couldn't be undone. This wasn't just about silencing a senator. This was about silencing the truth. Mara was already at the terminal again, frantically typing, trying to compress the data faster. She looked up, eyes wide with panic. "I'm almost done. We need 2 more minutes. Just 2. 2 minutes is something we don't have." Brianna snapped, her hand on the small weapon she had tucked under her coat. She was ready to fight, ready to take down as many of them as she could. But they were surrounded, and there was no way out without a bloody confrontation. A sharp crack echoed through the room as one of the agents fired a warning shot, narrowly missing Brianna. "Get down," Choi shouted, pushing Brianna to the floor. The room erupted into chaos. Gunfire filled the air, the crack of weapons discharging so loud that it felt like the walls were collapsing around them. Alex hit the ground instinctively, his breath coming fast and shallow as the room was flooded with blinding light from the overhead lights. His mind raced, trying to formulate a plan. They couldn't fight their way out, not with so many agents, not with their position compromised. They needed that data. They needed to finish this, expose the coalition's secret network to the world before it was too late. Mara's hands flew over the keyboard as the seconds ticked away. Alex could see the desperation in her eyes as she fought to finish the extraction. The countdown was on. Suddenly, the sound of a gunshot rang out, followed by the harsh thud of a body hitting the floor. "Brianna!" Alex shouted, his heart skipping a beat. But when he looked, he saw Brianna already getting back to her feet, a grim smile on her face. She had fired back at one of the agents, taking him out with a clean shot to the chest. She had the survival instincts of a warrior, but even so, it was a fight they couldn't win. "Not here. Not now. I'm good," Brianna said through gritted teeth. "But we can't stay here. Not much longer." Mara's voice was sharp. "I'm almost done. Just give me one more." Another shot. A burst of fire. This time, the bullet struck the terminal with a loud crash. Sparks flew from the screen, and Mara's body jerked back, thrown violently from the force of the impact. She crumpled to the floor in a heap. "Mara!" Alex screamed, rushing to her side. Blood stained her shirt, pooling around her. Her face was pale, and her eyes were wide with shock. She gasped for breath, her hand trembling as she reached for the terminal, still desperate to finish the data extraction. "We're out of time," she whispered, voice strained. "They'll come for you. But this is it. They won't stop." Alex's heart twisted in his chest. He couldn't lose her. Not now. Not after everything. He grabbed her hand, trying to keep her awake. "Mara, stay with me. Stay with us. We're getting out of here. We're..." Another explosion ripped through the room, knocking Alex off his feet. The world seemed to slow, the sound of distant screams filling his ears. The walls shook, and debris rained down from above, blinding him for a moment. When the smoke cleared, Alex saw that the room had collapsed around them. The last thing Alex saw was Mara's eyes, her face twisted in pain as she slipped into unconsciousness. Brianna and Choi were already moving, pulling Alex to his feet as the agents regrouped outside the wreckage. There was no time to mourn, no time to think. They had one choice: escape. "Move," Brianna shouted, grabbing Alex's arm. "We've got to go. Now." Alex wanted to argue, wanted to stay and fight, but he knew it was useless. Mara was gone. The data was lost, and the coalition had won. They sprinted down the now darkened corridors, their footsteps echoing in the silence. The tunnel network stretched on endlessly, a dark, labyrinthine maze that led them further from the city and from their past. But they didn't stop. They couldn't stop. Behind them, the coalition was already mobilizing, coming for them with everything they had. Hours passed. The adrenaline that had kept them moving began to fade, replaced by exhaustion and the weight of what had happened. They reached the edge of the underground network, another exit, hidden beneath an old industrial park. A faint light from the city above illuminated their path, casting long shadows against the cold concrete. Alex's chest tightened as they emerged into the night. They were free, at least for now. But what did it matter? They were still being hunted. The coalition's power was absolute, and the truth was buried. Every step forward felt like it led them deeper into a world where resistance was futile. "We need to get out of the country," Brianna said, her voice grim. "They'll be looking for us, everywhere." And we can't take this fight to the people if they find us first. Where can we go? Choi asked, looking back toward the city. We'll figure it out, Brianna said. But we can't stay here. Not anymore. Alex nodded, his mind still reeling from the loss of Mara. But he knew she hadn't died in vain. She had given them the push they needed. The coalition would never stop hunting them, never stop trying to silence them. But the truth couldn't be contained forever. They would find a way to fight back. As they disappeared into the night, Alex knew that the fight was far from over. The coalition's grip on the world was tightening, but there were cracks, small, hidden fractures that he and his team could exploit. The revelations of Executive Order 14176 had uncovered a world of lies, and now it was time to expose them to the world. But the path ahead was dangerous, and Alex couldn't shake the feeling that the coalition was only just getting started. And he was no longer fighting alone.